For nearly 2 decades, one name was synonymous with NCIS: Mark Harmon. As Special Agent Leroy Jethro Gibbs, he became the beating heart of one of television's longest-running dramas, a steady, silver-haired presence that fans built their Tuesday nights around. Then, almost without warning, he was gone. No dramatic send-off special, no long media tour, just a quiet exit that left millions of viewers asking the same question over and over. Why did Mark Harmon really leave NCIS? Today, we're breaking down everything Harmon himself has said about his departure, the clues the show buried in plain sight, and whether there's any real chance Gibbs ever walks back through that door. Let's start with the basics, because the timing of Harmon's exit surprised almost everyone. Rather than wrapping up his run at the end of a season, Harmon stepped away just 4 episodes into season 19. Viewers watched Gibbs travel to Alaska on what seemed like a routine case, and then simply never come home. His colleagues returned to Washington, D.C. to carry on with their jobs, while Gibbs stayed behind, alone, in the wilderness. For a show built around routine and structure, this was a jarring break in the pattern, and it immediately triggered a wave of theories. Was Gibbs dead? Had he retired? Was this some kind of storytelling trick that would be undone a few episodes later? The show's writers were careful never to frame this as a retirement. Gibbs didn't hand in a badge with a tearful speech in a bullpen surrounded by balloons and cake. Instead, he made a personal choice to remain in Alaska, away from the job that had defined him for so long. That distinction mattered a lot to fans, because it meant the door wasn't fully closed. It also mirrored something the show had done a few years earlier with Ducky, the beloved medical examiner played by David McCallum, whose presence was gradually reduced rather than erased. NCIS clearly didn't want to slam the door on a character audiences had loved for 19 years, so instead they left it cracked open, just enough for speculation to keep swirling. That ambiguity became even stranger when season 19 continued to list Harmon's name in the opening credits, episode after episode, even though Gibbs was nowhere on screen. For fans, watching his name roll by while a new face carried scenes he used to anchor created a strange, almost eerie feeling. Some viewers said it felt like watching a ghost linger in the background of a story that had already moved on without him. Others found it strangely comforting, a small reminder that the show still considered him part of its DNA even in his physical absence. That comfort didn't last, though. When season 20 premiered, Harmon's name was finally removed from the credits entirely, an unmistakable signal from the network that this chapter was closing for good, at least for the foreseeable future. Naturally, reactions from the fan base were all over the map. Some viewers embraced the shift, excited to see new characters get more room to breathe after being overshadowed by Gibbs for so long. Others were far less forgiving, describing the new title sequence as feeling hollow without the actor who had anchored it for 2 decades. There were even more personal stories floating around online, viewers saying their parents or grandparents, longtime loyal watchers of the franchise, were genuinely upset by the change, some even threatening to stop watching altogether. It's rare for a scripted network procedural to inspire that kind of emotional reaction, but that's exactly the level of attachment Harmon had built with his audience over 19 seasons. So what actually happened inside that final episode Harmon appeared in? Titled Great Wide Open, the episode sent Gibbs and fellow agent Tim McGee up to Alaska to investigate a company suspected of hiring a hitman. As the case unraveled, the 2 agents discovered the company's CEO was orchestrating a string of eliminations to protect a lucrative mining operation, even manipulating one of the victim's own spouses into helping cover it up. It was a classic NCIS mystery on the surface, dense with twists and a satisfying resolution. But underneath the case of the week plot, the episode was quietly building towards something much bigger. After the investigation wrapped, Gibbs and McGee took a moment to breathe, reflecting on a job well done in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness. That's when Gibbs dropped the announcement that would end his story on the show. He told McGee he wasn't coming home. He wasn't interested in getting his badge back. After everything, after the years of chasing killers and burying colleagues and carrying trauma most people never fully see, Gibbs chose something different for himself. Distance, quiet, a different kind of life far from Navy Yard hallways and interrogation rooms. Looking back, longtime viewers pointed out that the show had been dropping hints for a while. Earlier in the episode, FBI agent Alden Parker had led a team to search Gibbs' house, and the discovery of an unexplained hole in a wall added a strange, almost symbolic weight to the scene, as if something inside Gibbs had already started to crack before he ever set foot in Alaska. Parker even remarked, almost offhandedly, that something told him Gibbs wasn't coming back, a line that landed very differently once the ending played out. There were smaller emotional beats too, callbacks to the loss of Gibbs' wife and daughter years earlier, reminders that grief had shaped this character from the very beginning of the series, long before most current viewers had even started watching. The episode also gave Gibbs quiet farewells with people who mattered to him throughout the show's run. A scene with former director Leon Vance carried real weight, a simple exchange of gratitude between two men who had clashed and respected each other in equal measure over the years. A moment with Ducky offered a similar sense of closure, tying back to a friendship that had defined much of the show's early seasons. And in the closing minutes, Gibbs offered McGee some quiet advice about trusting the process instead of rushing toward perfection. A line that felt less like dialogue and more like Harmon himself passing something down to the next generation of the franchise. But why did Harmon actually decide to walk away from a role that had made him one of the most recognizable faces on network television? In interviews since his exit, he's given a few different but overlapping answers. In a featurette recorded around the release of the Season 19 DVD, Harmon explained that his decision came from wanting to protect the character rather than let it grow stale. He said what always drew him back to the role was Gibbs himself, and that keeping the character fresh and challenging mattered more to him than simply staying on the air for the sake of it. In his eyes, walking away at this point in the story felt honest rather than premature. Age was clearly part of the equation too. In an interview a couple of years before his exit, Harmon acknowledged the natural progression of time, admitting that both he and the character were getting older, and that the writers had leaned into that reality rather than pretending Gibbs was frozen in place. Harmon spoke with real appreciation about the writing team's efforts to keep pushing him as an actor even as the years piled up, but there's a difference between appreciating a challenge and wanting to keep meeting it indefinitely. Perhaps the most candid explanation came later, during an appearance on a daytime talk show, when Harmon admitted something simpler and more human than any of the artistic reasoning. He was tired. He described how his original expectations going into the role were shaped around being present for his family, only to discover the reality of an intense network drama schedule, recalling a first day on set that stretched for 22 hours, a grueling pace that continued through much of the show's early years. Nearly 2 decades of that kind of commitment takes a toll on anyone, no matter how much affection they have for the work or the people around them. Since leaving NCIS, Harmon hasn't returned to acting, at least not publicly, though he did sign with a major talent agency in early 2023, one that represents a number of well-known names across film and television. That move suggested he wasn't necessarily done working, even if Gibbs was behind him. As for whether Gibbs himself might ever reappear, the show's own producers have been careful not to close that door completely. Executive producer Steve Binder spoke about Harmon remaining connected to the series behind the scenes even after stepping away from the character, framing him as something like a guiding presence for the show's ongoing direction. Network executives echoed similar sentiments, describing Harmon as someone who would always be tied to the franchise's legacy regardless of his day-to-day involvement. Still, nothing concrete has been confirmed about a full return. Harmon himself has said that if there are plans in motion to bring Gibbs back, he isn't aware of them. Fans have continued to speculate, especially given the show's history of honoring departed cast members, most notably after the real-life passing of David McCallum, whose character Ducky had been part of NCIS since its very first episode. Some viewers believe a tribute moment involving Ducky could open the door for Gibbs to make a brief reappearance, even if only in a limited, symbolic capacity rather than a full-time return to the cast. For now, the ending Harmon and the writers built for Gibbs remains intentionally unresolved, a character who didn't die, didn't officially retire, and didn't get erased from the story, but simply chose to disappear into a quieter life far away from the job that had consumed him for so long. Whether that ambiguity was designed purely for storytelling reasons or left open as a genuine possibility for a future return, it's kept fans talking years after the episode aired, and it's part of why Gibbs, even in his absence, still feels like the emotional core of NCIS. So that's the real story behind Mark Harmon's departure from NCIS, straight from his own words and the choices the show made around his exit. Do you think Gibbs deserves a proper return, or was this the right way to close out his story? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.